Once I visited a pig farmer. This is a true story, out in the country. He and his wife regularly attended the church, and I had just started attending there. I was new, and I was trying to get around to visit everybody. I was a full-time elder. I wasn't there to do it all, but it was my endeavor to try to get to know people. So I called him up. Can I come out for a visit? Sure. Set a date and a time and went out. He and his wife sat me down at the kitchen table, and I asked all the perfunctory questions about what it's like to be a hog farmer. How long have you done it? I noticed the pictures on the mantle. You want to tell me about your grandchildren? All those sorts of things that you do when you're visiting somebody in the home, you know. How many children do you have? Where did they go to college? After about 15 minutes, he got up and just quietly went over to his desk and pulled out his checkbook, came to the table, and began writing out a check to the church. And he says, I suppose this is why you came. Oh, just blindsided me. I had no idea that that's what he was thinking. And I bent over backwards. No, it has nothing to do with that. I just wanted to get to know you. Well, I know you need the money, so. And I didn't know what to do. I took the check. I should have said, but I didn't want to offend him. He had a different idea of what visitation meant than I did. And we missed the boat. It was totally a fruitless endeavor. Another time, that same church, maybe another time, I went and visited an old lady at a senior home next to us. And she was the kind, when I talked to her church, I politely talked to her, and she says, oh, I'm just one of the old ladies, you know. She had a real spry wit about her, you know. So I went over there and buzzed her from the front door of the condominium complex. It was the seniors' apartments. And she had seen me walking up the aisle, walking up the driveway, and when I buzzed it, she goes, go away, I don't want any. And remembering who she was, I says, tough, I'm going to give it to you anyway. She laughs and opens the door. I go upstairs. We had a great fun time, you know. She was a dear sister in the Lord. But what she said really kind of struck us. She says, yeah, I appreciate the visit, you know, but I don't need pastoral visits. There's other people that need it more than I do. Just threw me in a loop. You know, I was doing all the right things. It was my first time doing this ministry thing on a full-time basis, and I was just missing the boat on what it means to visit. Well, different people have different ideas of what pastoral care is. Pastoral visitation is when the preacher comes, you know, it must be pretty serious. That just happened to me not the other day. Talking to a guy, he says, let's get together for coffee. He says, did I do something wrong? Maybe I'm projecting it. Maybe there's a milieu, an atmosphere out there of what pastoral care is all about, and I want to break out of those stereotypes. One fellow, Ramesh Richard, who's an Indian fellow, teaches at Dallas Seminary. He put it this way: anytime you can break out of the stereotype, you add credibility to yourself. But if you're going through what people are expecting, then they bring all their expectations onto it. In the past, visitation meant the pastor or an elder officially representing the church got to know his people by visiting their homes, balancing a teacup on the knee, talking about the family pictures, while the people squeeze yawns through their teeth. And then the pastor gives a short devotional, praise, and then leaves, and then checks it off on their list. Okay, I'm 2/3 of the way through the congregation. Yet the irony of, we say that's old-fashioned, that's old school. In my travels, I hear a lot of people saying, I don't think the elders care about me. I wasn't in church for 4 weeks, and I came back, and no one missed me. No one said, where were you? No one called me while I was gone. Pastoral care is still needed. People need to know that they're being cared for. Sometimes it's the people we don't think need it the most. I think of a lot of senior people, who can't get out. And it's easy to say, well, just because they're old and retired doesn't mean you retire from the things of the Lord. Well, my wife's parents are, in their 80s, and I see how much energy it takes out of them. It's like I don't relate to it, but I'm getting closer to their age. I'm still, a couple of decades away, but I'm starting to see, I think I can understand. And there's loneliness. Does anybody care for me? Even the person that is outgoing and brash and the talk of the conversation, sometimes they might be doing that because there's a deep loneliness inside, and this is their cover. People want to know that they're cared for. The forms of meeting those needs may change, but the needs themselves don't. Shepherds, and by shepherds, let me clarify my terminology. I'm not talking about the pastor. I'm not talking about the full-time worker necessarily. They should be doing shepherding work. The word shepherd in the Scripture is not used as an office. Even the word pastor is never used as an office. It's used as a gift, a function. It's a ministry. Anybody who's doing pastoral care for people is a pastor in that sense. Shepherds, and especially leaders, elders of the church, need to know their sheep in order to care for them. You need to know them. The fellow that visited me in the hospital that I told you about in the earlier session, he didn't know what I was struggling with. He had absolutely, completely missed it. I've remembered that every time I visit somebody in the hospital. I remember that. I don't want them to, when I walk away, that person's thinking, that just filled in some time. Well, how do you get to know people? In a practical way. Well, we can do things like go to conferences that and read books that sociologists tell us about, and they'll tell us about the baby boomers and all the some of you might know who those are. They're people in my age category, from 45 to, born from 1945 to 1963 or something like that, and they'll tell you all the characteristics of them. But you can find then the Gen X generation. You can read sociological studies of that. Go to pastors' conferences or ministry conferences, give you all the descriptions of what these people look like, and then they'll tell you, well, no, it's Gen X, Gen Y we call them, and I'm not sure if there's a difference. There's an overlap. After a while, it gets a little difficult because, just for me, it's confusing. Well, some people call them the millenniums, then you call them the generation next, and the next generation, and then there's the echo boomers, and it just goes on and on. And it seems like, if you're really going to be effective in knowing your people, you got to be up on all the latest literature, And those things are helpful, don't get me wrong. And I've been to the conferences, and they're helpful. It's part of the grab bag of tools that you pull from. But nothing beats spending time with individuals, face to face. You can't beat it. And I don't mean FaceTime, face to face. People aren't statistics. They resist being treated as the national average. They feel boxed in. They're individuals. They want to be known personally. Everyone is unique, and they're all self-aware. And every person, all of us, at the core that we constantly struggle with, but it's always there, we all feel that we are the center of the universe. Now, it's easy to be theological and say, well, that's just sin. You need it rooted out. The heart is desperately wicked above all else, and, sin, black. And, I know Jeremiah 32 and all those, Jeremiah 17:9. I know those, that's theological. But those deep needs that come out of that self-centeredness do affect people. And the only way we're going to be able to help people is by knowing them, and the only way we're going to know them is by having time with them. And the only way that time is going to be valuable is if we listen to them. That's a struggle I know very well. I have a hard time listening to people because the minute I get a hint of what their problem is, my mind is already thumbing through the scriptures, thumbing through the help books that I've had, and here's how you approach that, and then I'm no longer listening. Or I might hear what they're saying and make the interpretation of what I think they're meaning, and that they just didn't say it right. How many times have I done that? My wife and I would do that all the time. Do you do this? It's right here. And she goes, oh, no, that's not what I meant. Well, that's what you said. So we need to spend time listening. Facebook fellowship in our day and age seems to replace face-to-face flesh and blood connecting. And Twitter touching is not like touching of a handshake or a hug. LinkedIn is a poor substitute for being loved into the fellowship. These things can help, but I think there's a growing awareness that the community is suffering with all the technology that's trying to create community, but it's not the kind of community that ultimately is going to really be of help.